Hi, my name is Elaine Pendergrass. My background is in education, school administration, and children's ministry. And oftentimes as a children's minister, I get asked the question, which kind of Bible should I choose for my child? It's a great question to ask parents. I'm so glad that you care about this and that you're looking for some great resources. Yay, parents, good work. So let me talk about a few things to help you make the right decision. First of all, keep in mind that the Bible is translated from other languages. So guess what? It wasn't written originally in English. It was written more in Hebrew, Greek, some Aramaic, some other languages, and some very smart people, smarter than I, were able to translate from the original language into other languages, including English. So as a result, we have different versions. They sound a little bit different. The wording is a little bit different. The accuracy is a little bit different. So keep that in mind as you make a choice. A couple of the Bibles that I like to use, the versions that I like to use and actually read myself, the one I read myself is the English Standard Version. Another good one for kids is the New International Reader's Version, NIRV. You might be familiar with the NIV. This one is written like that, but at a 4th grade level. So keep that in mind. I would say do not use the King James Version, although you might have grown up on it. The language is tricky. The language is different than how we speak today, and it will probably cause a lot more problem than it's worth to use that with your child. Let's talk about the kinds of Bibles that they have for kids. So they're kind of broken into two different groups. There are story Bibles and then there are regular Bibles. Story Bibles are written just like they sound, in stories. So not all of the stories, not all of the texts, not all of the things from the Bible that you or I might read are included in story Bibles. Instead, those that write story Bibles choose a lot of the stories that are sometimes concrete. You know, you can actually see or hear or feel if you were there, the things that they talk about. They kind of pick the big top stories that you might have grown up with in Sunday school if you went to Sunday school as a child, like David and Goliath, creation, Joseph and his coat, all the different things like that. In the Old Testament and then the New Testament, of course, Jesus's birth, all the way to his resurrection. And they're written as a paraphrase. So where we talked about earlier, the translations that were written from the text into English, or translated from the text, the original text into English, guess what? Paraphrases are different. The Message is a Bible that was written as a paraphrase. So it's not a Bible you want to do like word studies with, like, oh, the word love shows up this many times, because it's a paraphrase. It's not the exact translation from the text. So very much in the same way, story Bibles are written in paraphrases. So it takes the story, let's say Daniel, for example. In the Lion's Den, it might be 2 or 3 pages with pictures in the story Bible. But if you read the book of Daniel, it's several chapters from the beginning of how he came about all the way to why he was in the Lion's Den and what happened as a result, and then after that. So keep that in mind as you choose story Bibles. One thing that I encourage parents to do is to read the story in your real Bible alongside your child reading the story Bible. So maybe your child loves the story of David and Goliath. And so you take that, find it in the real Bible, look it up, use your table of contents, find the story, and then read it for yourself. And then you'll know how accurate the summary really is. Another thing that you can do if you are reading the story yourself is you can make corrections as needed. Guess what, parents? If you're reading the story Bible, not everything is accurate from the original text, as I said. And it's okay to say, we're not going to say it like that before you're reading it or as you're reading it. A classic example in several story Bibles that you'll find are some things that are kind of lore or myth that come along the way, but they're not actually in the text. And oftentimes we see these, for example, in Christmas plays and in movies and on and on and on, but we want to be accurate with our children. Don't you want to teach your children the real stories? When I grew up, for example, learning these stories in Sunday school and from home and things like that, I learned them, and then as an adult, when I read the story, the real story from the real Bible, I went, wait a second, that's not what it says. I was taught wrong, and it really bothered me. So today, when I plan lessons, for example, for kids that I'm teaching or that my leaders are teaching, I make sure to read it and check it out and make sure it's accurate, not just what I heard growing up. So in story Bibles, a couple of examples of things you'll often see that are not accurate are in the creation story, oftentimes it'll say a snake. And I'll have a picture of a snake. And in the creation stories, it does not have a snake, it has a serpent. It's a different thing. Another thing that you'll oftentimes see is in the nativity stories and the birth narratives about Jesus's birth. Oftentimes they'll talk about a stable, which is not mentioned in the story. Oftentimes they'll talk about the 3 kings or 3 wise men. A better translation for both of those is magi. but it doesn't say there were 3 of them. There were 3 gifts given, but it doesn't say 3. So it's really important, I think, to be accurate with our kids. We want to teach them right the first time. So as I'm reading that, if I came across that text and it was reading about the wise men or the magi, it might say, it might say 3 wise men brought gifts to Jesus. And what I just would do is I'd say, and the wise men brought gifts to Jesus. So if I know the real story for myself because I've read it, then I can make corrections as needed to make sure my kids learn the story as it should be taught. So after we think about story Bibles, which are written more for little kids that love pictures and stories and things like that, you want to look at the next level. So when your kids are able to read pretty fluently, you can get them a real Bible. And real Bibles, I like the hands-on Bible. I like the adventure Bible. I'm sure there are others. There are millions, maybe not millions. There are a lot of choices. You can get boy-specific, girl-specific, cartoons, on and on and on. Again, I would consider the same things when I'm choosing a Bible for an older child. I would consider the translation. If it says KJV, I'm not going to look at it because it's not a good translation for kids. If it says ESV or NIRV or NIV, I'm going to look at it. And then I'm going to flip through and look at some pages. I'm going to read through it and see if it's reader friendly, see if it makes sense. I'm also going to look at the notes. Sometimes they have little notes or little comments. Now keep in mind that these notes and comments are written by the people who wrote the Bible, not who translated the Bible, but the publishers. And so they are not biblical necessarily. They are not written by the people that God inspired. They can be really accurate. I'm sure there was some great thought gone into those things and all of that, but just keep in mind that that's not the actual Bible. Those are just some extra things included. Another tip for parents is I've come across a book that's called the Bible Story Handbook. It is written by John and Kim Walton. John Walton is actually an Old Testament professor, and he wrote a book with his wife, and it's called the Bible Story Handbook. And I really like this book. It is very user-friendly. It is readable. It is also written by an Old Testament scholar, which I think is pretty cool. And so I can look of 175 different stories in here. I could say, I want to learn about the 10 lepers. And so it tells me where to find it, Luke 17, 11 through 19. In this book, it's on page 355. So I flip to the page, and it's going to have several things in each of it. It will talk about the lesson focus. It will talk about the lesson application, kind of what do you do with it. It has the biblical context, so what's happening around the time that this was written in the Bible itself and in the society itself. It also talks about interpretational issues, meaning some people interpret it this way, some people interpret it this way. The other part that it includes is some background information, and then it has mistakes to avoid. And I really like this because I can read through the 10 lepers story. I can read it in the Bible itself. I can read what John and Kim Walton wrote about it, and then I feel more informed to talk to the kids and to read to the kids. So this is a great thing to have beside your bedside or on in your library or whatever, parents, as you use them with your kids. The most important thing I would say about choosing a Bible for your kids is read the Bible. Parents, read the Bible. You can read it in a Bible form, book form, you can read it on your app, whatever, but read the Bible. Set the example for your kids that this is where we get our authority. This is where we learn about who Jesus is. And read the Bible with your kids. Let them see you read it and read alongside them, read with them, and all of that, and you'll begin to follow Jesus even better because you'll learn what he said and what he did. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe, share it with your friends, and I will for sure put some links to some of the Bibles that I really like in the comments.